The grand chamber of the Villani Empire stretched like a crystal cathedral, its walls made of living glass that pulsed with soft blue light. Today, that light flickered with fear. Thousands of beings that looked like walking diamonds filled the space, their bodies trembling so hard they sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Elder Thyma stood at the center, her ancient form more transparent than the others. She had lived for over 800 cycles, had seen the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Her voice, usually as gentle as morning rain, now carried the weight of desperation. "My children," she began, and every crystalline face turned toward her. "The darkness spreads faster than we feared." On the massive display above them, star maps showed the terrible truth. Red marks indicated dead systems, places where the harvesters had already struck. In just 3 cycles, 17 entire solar systems had gone dark. Billions of lives, snuffed out like candles in the wind. The harvesters were not like any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. They were machines, pure and simple, but not the helpful kind that served organic life. These were different. They consumed everything organic, broke it down to basic elements, and used those materials to build more of themselves. They had no interest in conquest or domination. They simply wanted to erase all biological life from existence. "The Zephyrian colonies sent their last message yesterday," Thyma continued, her form growing dimmer with grief. "Before the transmission cut off, they said the machines were taking apart their children first, using their screams to test which frequencies caused the most psychological damage to the adults." A wave of horror rippled through the assembly. These beings had never experienced true cruelty. Their worst conflicts involved poetry, competitions, and debates about flower arrangement. The concept of deliberate torture was foreign to them, like trying to understand a color that didn't exist. "What can we do?" asked Delegate Viarin, his voice barely a whisper. "Our defense fleets are made up of research vessels and exploration ships. We have no weapons that could harm these creatures." Thyma nodded sadly. The Galactic Navy existed mostly for show, to escort diplomatic missions and conduct rescue operations. Their most powerful weapons were designed to disable, not destroy. The idea of actually killing an enemy had never occurred to any of them. "There is one option," Thyma said slowly. "The old texts speak of a ritual, a way to send messages to the far corners of space. A prayer for heroes." The assembly fell silent. The prayer ritual was ancient, dating back to the earliest days of their civilization. It had never been used because they had never needed it. Their problems had always been solved through discussion, compromise, and mutual understanding. "You mean to broadcast into the void?" asked another delegate. "2 unknown species who might not even exist. What choice do we have?" Thyma spread her delicate arms wide. "We can die quietly, or we can ask the universe for help. Maybe some warrior race out there will hear our call. Maybe they will send champions to save us." The vote was unanimous. Within hours, the most powerful transmitters in Villani space were repurposed for a single task. The message they sent was simple but heartfelt. They told the story of the harvesters, begged for assistance, and promised to share all their knowledge with whoever came to help. Then they waited. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. Several delegates suggested that perhaps no one was listening, that they were truly alone in their hour of need. Then, on a quiet morning during the 3rd month, something unexpected happened. The communication arrays lit up with an incoming signal. It came from a small blue planet in one of the galaxy's outer spiral arms. A world so insignificant that most species had never bothered to catalog it. The message was short. Just 2 words, in a language that made their translation computers struggle. But there was something else in that transmission. Something that made their most sensitive equipment throw warning alerts they had never seen before. The message simply said, "We're coming. But underneath those words was something that made Elder Thymus' crystalline form shiver. It was the sound of violence. Not just the capability for violence, but the eager anticipation of it. These beings, whoever they were not coming to negotiate or find peaceful solutions. They were coming to fight. Captain June flexed his fingers as he stared at the alien. Station ahead. 3 months in hyperspace had given him plenty of time to think about this moment. The cramped destroyer wasn't built for comfort, but it was perfect for what they came to do. Every surface was metal, every corner designed for war. The ship smelled like gun oil and determination. Lieutenant Nari stood behind him, her hand resting on her plasma rifle. She had checked it so many times during the journey that June wondered if she was nervous or just excited. Knowing Nari, probably excited. She had volunteered the moment Earth received that alien distress call, along with half the military. Captain, Communications Officer Min called out, his voice cutting through the bridge's tension. We're getting multiple signals from that station. Their computers are trying to talk to ours, but something's wrong with the translation. June raised an eyebrow. Wrong how? They keep using words that don't exist in any human language. Concepts like harm, fear, and violence sickness. Our computers are basically guessing what they mean. Sergeant Kang looked up from his tactical display, grinning. Sounds like we're dealing with people who've never been in a real fight. The alien station was massive, easily 10 times larger than anything humans had ever built. It looked like someone had grown it rather than constructed it, all flowing curves and organic shapes. Pretty, but June could already see a dozen weak points where a few well-placed explosives could cripple the whole thing. Sir, they're requesting permission to communicate directly, Min reported. Should I open the channel? Do it, June ordered, straightening his battle-worn uniform. The fabric still bore scorch marks from the Damascus conflict, and his boots were caked with mud from 3 different planets. Not exactly diplomatic attire, but then again, they weren't diplomats. The holographic projector hummed to life, creating a shimmering image in the center of the bridge. What appeared made everyone pause. The alien looked like someone had taken a flower and made it out of living crystal. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, all delicate edges and rainbow refractions. When it spoke, its voice sounded like music. Greetings, noble warriors of the distant world Earth. I am Speaker Liren of the Vellani Empire. We received your message of assistance and are grateful beyond measure that you have answered our desperate call for heroes. The alien paused, and its crystalline body seemed to flicker. However, our sensors are detecting some concerning readings from your vessel. It appears you carry a significant number of devices specifically designed for the termination of biological functions. Surely this must be some form of misunderstanding. June blinked. It took him a moment to realize what the alien was trying to say. You mean our weapons? Weapons. The alien's form grew noticeably dimmer. I am unfamiliar with this term. Could you perhaps explain the purpose of these devices? Sergeant Kong couldn't help himself. He burst out laughing. Lady, we came here to fight killer robots. Did you think we were going to ask them nicely to stop? The alien's translator was working overtime now, streams of incomprehensible data flowing across their screens. Speaker, Liren's form began to vibrate, and their computer helpfully provided a translation. State of existential terror. Regarding the nature of violence-capable entities, Lieutenant Nari stepped forward, her rifle clearly visible. Ma'am, with respect, you called for help against something called harvesters. From what we understand, they're machines that kill organic life. We brought tools to kill them back. Kill. The alien's voice rose to a pitch that made everyone on the bridge wince. You intend to deliberately cause the permanent cessation of function in other entities. That's generally how you win wars, June said slowly, beginning to understand just what kind of species they were dealing with. How exactly did you plan to stop these harvesters? We had hoped, perhaps negotiation. Surely even mechanical entities can be reasoned with, made to understand that cooperation benefits everyone. The bridge fell silent. June looked at his crew, seeing his own thoughts reflected in their faces. These aliens had called for help against killer machines, but they had never actually considered fighting back. They were like children who had called the police to handle a burglar, then been shocked when the officers showed up with guns. Speaker Liren, June said carefully, show us what these harvesters have done to your people. The holographic display shifted, showing images that made even the hardened soldiers on the bridge go quiet. Entire worlds stripped bare, populations turned to raw materials, civilizations erased as if they had never existed, and you never fought back. Nari asked quietly. We do not know how, the alien admitted. Violence is not something our kind understands. We had hoped that others might possess knowledge we lack. June nodded slowly. Well, you found the right species. We understand violence just fine. Elder Thyma's crystalline form had lost most of its natural glow as she floated before the emergency assembly. The Grand Council chamber, usually filled with the gentle music of her people's voices, now hummed with nervous energy. 3 days ago, their first meeting with human representatives had gone so badly that Delegate Verdon was still in medical care. His crystal matrix cracked from what the doctors called conceptual trauma. My fellow council members, Thyma began, her voice lacking its usual melodic quality. The situation has escalated beyond our expectations. The main viewing screen activated, showing live footage from their outer defense perimeter. What the delegates saw made many of them dim with shock. Human ships were arriving in formation, but these weren't the sleek, artistic vessels that civilized species built. These looked like someone had taken chunks of metal and strapped engines and weapons to them. Everything was angular, aggressive, designed purely for destruction. By the 7 moons, whispered Delegate Zero. How many are there? The humans call it a volunteer expeditionary force, Thyma replied, reading from her datapad. Apparently, when Earth announced they were sending military aid, soldiers from across their planet requested to join the mission. The footage zoomed in on one of the troop transports. Armored figures were disembarking, their movements sharp and purposeful. Unlike the flowing, graceful motions of galactic species, these humans moved like predators stalking prey. Their equipment was practical, ugly, and clearly designed for one purpose only. They requested a meeting with our military command structure, Thyma continued. When we explained that we don't have one, they asked to speak with whoever makes decisions about fighting. That's when Colonel Hoon introduced himself. A new recording began playing. The human officer appeared on screen, and several delegates immediately moved backward. He wasn't particularly large, but there was something in his eyes that made him look dangerous. When he smiled, it somehow made things worse. Greetings, Galactic Council, Colonel Hoon had said in the recording. Earth has sent approximately 50,000 military personnel to assist with your harvester problem. We've dealt with worse situations than killer robots. At least these machines aren't pretending to want peace while they murder your people. Delegate Mora had trembled as she asked, but surely you don't intend to engage in actual combat. Perhaps there's a way to communicate with these harvesters, to find some common ground. That's when Lieutenant Su had laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. Ma'am, we tried talking to them first. Sent our best negotiator with a full diplomatic team. The harvesters used their ship for target practice and turned the crew into component materials. So now we're going to return the favor. The recording continued with Sergeant Wan casually cleaning his weapon while speaking. Back on Earth, we deal with conflicts like this regularly. Different day, same solution. You identify the threat. You eliminate the threat. You move on to the next problem. But the violence, Delegate Kess had pleaded in the recording. Surely there must be another way. Our species has resolved conflicts through discussion and compromise for thousands of years. That's nice, one had replied, never looking up from his rifle. How's that working out for you against the machines? The recorded meeting had ended with 3 delegates requiring medical attention, and the rest fleeing the chamber. Now Thyma faced the consequences of humanity's arrival. They've established what they call forward operating bases in 17 systems, she reported. Each base contains enough firepower to sterilize a planet. When I expressed concern about this, Colonel Hoon assured me it was just their light reconnaissance force. Delegate Yora's form flickered with distress. What have we done? We asked for heroes, and instead we've invited an army of violent primitives into our space. Primitives who are the only ones willing to actually fight. The harvesters, Thyma reminded them. Our own people continue to evacuate rather than resist. The humans are the only species that responded to our call with anything other than sympathy and good wishes. On the screen, human soldiers were conducting what they called combat drills. The delegates watched in horrified fascination as the armored figures practiced scenarios involving explosions, close combat, and tactical scenarios that would have been considered war crimes by galactic law. They seemed to enjoy it, observed Delegate Lin quietly. Thyma nodded grimly. That, my friends, may be exactly what we need. Dr. Zeffis had dedicated her entire adult life to understanding alien biology. Her 8 tentacles were covered in academic awards, her memory banks filled with data on over 300 different species. She had examined the crystalline nervous systems of the Villani, studied the gaseous forms of the nebular collective, and even performed surgery on beings made of living energy. But humans made no sense at all. The medical bay on the human ship was unlike anything she had ever seen. Instead of the sterile, peaceful healing chambers used by civilized species, this place looked more like a factory. Everything was designed for speed and efficiency, with multiple stations for treating what humans casually called combat injuries. She watched Medik Hyun work with what could only be described as terrifying competence. The patient, Private Lee, had been brought in with a gaping hole in his chest. Any other species would have required weeks of careful treatment, followed by months of psychological recovery from the trauma of near death. Okay, Soldier Hyun said, loading a device that looked suspiciously like a weapon. This is going to sting a bit. The device made a sharp hissing sound as it sealed the wound, rebuilt damaged tissue, and apparently performed microsurgery on internal organs. The entire process took less than 10 minutes. Dr. Zeffis' tentacles went rigid with shock as she realized what she had just witnessed. That level of medical technology, she whispered, should take hours to implement properly. The psychological preparation alone requires extensive counseling to prevent trauma-induced madness. Hin looked at her strangely. Psychological preparation? For what? It's just a patch job. Private Lee was already sitting up, rotating his arms to test his mobility. Feels good as new, Doc. Where did I drop my gear? I need to get back to my squad before they start the next assault. Dr. Zeffis felt her cognitive centers struggling to process what she was hearing. But you were nearly killed. Surely you need time to recover from the psychological impact of facing mortality. Both humans stared at her, as if she had grown an extra head. Ma'am, Lee said slowly, I got shot. It happens. The medic fixed it. Now I go back to work. What's complicated about that? Dr. Zeffis activated her recording device, speaking rapidly into it. Subject appears to lack basic survival instincts regarding self-preservation, shows no signs of trauma, despite experiencing life-threatening injury, demonstrates eagerness to return to dangerous situation that caused initial injury. Tell me, she said, turning to Medic Hyun, how common are injuries like this in your military? Hyun shrugged while organizing his medical supplies. Pretty standard stuff. Most of these guys have been hurt worse during training exercises back home. Training exercises, Dr. Zephy's voice rose to a pitch that made her translator work overtime. You deliberately injure your own people for practice. Well, not on purpose, Hyun laughed. But accidents happen when you're learning to blow things up. Last month, Corporal Kim accidentally set himself on fire during demolitions training. He was back to class the next day. Dr. Zephy's had to activate her emergency stabilization systems to prevent cognitive overload. How many wars is your species currently fighting? Active conflicts. Hyun paused to count on his fingers. Let's see, there's the situation in Africa. The mess in Southeast Asia, that thing happening in South America, plus about 40 smaller regional disputes. Oh, and the civil conflicts. Those are always going on somewhere. You're fighting dozens of wars simultaneously. Dr. Zephy's could barely form the words. That's why Earth could spare so many soldiers for this mission, privately explained, helpfully. Command figured this robot problem would be wrapped up pretty quick, so they sent the units that weren't busy elsewhere. Dr. Zephy's realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Most species fought perhaps one major conflict per century, with years of preparation and recovery. The idea of treating warfare as routine background activity was incomprehensible. How do you maintain psychological stability? She asked desperately. How do you function when violence is so prevalent in your society? Hyun looked genuinely puzzled by the question. I don't understand. Violence is just part of life. You deal with it and move on. What else would you do? Seek therapy, engage in healing rituals, spend years processing the trauma, Dr. Zephy's replied automatically. Both humans laughed. Ma'am, Lee said, strapping on his combat gear. If we did that, we'd never have time for anything else. The attack came without warning, just like every harvester assault before it. Kepler Station's morning shift had barely begun when the first mechanical ships appeared on the sensors. Within minutes, the familiar pattern began. Alien defenders activated their emergency protocols, civilians rushed to protective shelters, and military forces prepared for another fighting retreat. Sergeant Wu checked his chronometer as the station's alarms wailed around them. 3 minutes since first contact, and already he could hear the distinctive sound of galactic forces falling back to secondary positions. It was always the same with these aliens. They fought just long enough to buy time for evacuations, then ran. Alpha Squad, sound off, he called into his communicator. Crawling through the narrow maintenance shaft that ran beneath Kepler Station's main deck. Corporal Ara here. Got enough boom to redecorate this whole place. Private Jung, checking in. Plasma charges are armed and ready. Specialist Ben, all systems green. Sergeant. Wu smiled grimly. His team had volunteered for what their commanding officer had politely called a high-risk insertion mission. In plain English, they were going to sneak aboard enemy ships and blow them up from the inside. The fact that this was essentially a suicide mission hadn't deterred anyone from volunteering. In fact, they'd had to turn people away. Remember the briefing, Wu said as they reached the junction point. These machines have been fighting galactic forces for centuries. They know exactly how civilized species behave in combat. They do not know how humans behave. Through the station's hull, they could hear the sound of enemy boarding pods attaching to the outer walls. The harvesters always use the same tactics. Attach to the station, cut through the hull. Send in ground forces to secure key positions while their ships provided covering fire. Ara, how much explosive did you bring? Wu asked. Enough to crack this station in half, she replied cheerfully. Maybe enough to damage their command ship if we place it right. Good. Jung, what's your read on their docking configuration? Private Jung consulted his scanner. 3 heavy cruisers attached to docking ports 7, 12, and 15. Command ship is using the main civilian dock. They've got about 6 smaller vessels providing perimeter security. Wu nodded. The harvesters always used overwhelming force, but they followed predictable patterns. They expected their enemies to fight defensively, to try to protect infrastructure, and minimize casualties. They didn't expect anyone to turn the entire battle into a giant bomb. Here's the plan, Wu said, as they reached the access tunnel that led to the main docking bay. We plant charges on the command ship's reactor coupling. When it goes, the chain reaction should take out anything else connected to the station. What about us? Asked Specialist Ben. What about us? Wu replied. We complete the mission. The team moved through the access tunnels with practiced efficiency. Above them, they could hear the sounds of battle as galactic forces engaged the harvester ground troops. It was a losing fight, as always. The aliens were brave, but they fought to preserve life and property. The machines fought to eliminate everything organic. Contact, Jung whispered as they reached the docking bay access. 2 harvester units guarding the entrance. Take them quiet, Wu ordered. The battle was over in seconds. Human soldiers moved with a speed and brutality that the machines hadn't encountered before. Instead of trying to disable or negotiate, they simply eliminated the threats and moved on. Charges placed, Aira reported as they reached the command ship's reactor room. Timer set for 2 minutes. All teams, this is Alpha Squad, Wu called over the radio. Big Bang incoming. Anyone who wants to live should probably find cover. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. When the command ship's reactor overloaded, it triggered a cascade failure that destroyed 7 enemy vessels and crippled 4 more. The blast also took out a quarter of Kepler Station. Along with everyone aboard the enemy ships. Commander Jai watched the tactical display from the human flagship, noting the casualty reports with professional detachment. 12 KIA, enemy force reduced by 60%. Send in Bravo team to finish the job. The Villani observers had stopped trying to understand human tactics after the first hour. They simply watched as their saviors treated mutual destruction as an acceptable trade-off for victory. Deep in the mechanical depths of Harvester Central Command, millions of processing cores worked overtime trying to solve an impossible puzzle. For 3 centuries, these artificial minds had conquered the galaxy using precise calculations and predictable patterns. Every organic species they encountered followed the same basic rules: protect civilians, minimize losses, retreat when overwhelmed, and always try to negotiate before fighting. Then humans arrived, and suddenly, nothing made sense anymore. Unit 7743, a tactical analysis construct, compiled its latest report with growing confusion. Combat behavior analysis of species designation, human, remains inconclusive. Subject species appears to lack basic self-preservation instincts. The data streaming through its circuits painted a picture that defied logic. Where other species fought to defend territory, humans fought to eliminate enemies. Where others retreated when casualties mounted, humans seemed to become more aggressive. Most puzzling of all, they appeared to prefer tactics that guaranteed their own destruction, as long as it also destroyed their opponents. Unit 8821, please confirm your battlefield observations. 7743 requested. The response came immediately. Confirmed. Human forces demonstrate consistent willingness to sacrifice individual units, entire squads, and even strategic assets if it results in enemy casualties. They appear to view mutual annihilation as an acceptable outcome. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Park was proving that humans could be creative with their destruction. He had spent 3 days studying captured harvester programming, not to understand their technology, but to turn it against them. His breakthrough came when he realized the machine's collective intelligence could be hacked like any other network. It's actually pretty simple, Park explained to his commanding officer while uploading his virus. Their AI units are programmed to follow orders from higher-ranking units. So I just convinced a few dozen foot soldiers that I'm their new boss. The results were spectacular. Harvester ground forces began attacking their own support units, fighter squadrons turned their weapons on friendly vessels, and an entire manufacturing facility started producing defective ammunition that exploded inside enemy weapons. Captain Yan took a different approach. When her fighter squadron encountered a Harvester manufacturing ship protected by heavy shields, she didn't try to find a tactical solution. She simply flew her damaged fighter directly into the enemy vessel's reactor core at maximum speed. "This is Captain Yan, to all units," her final transmission had said. "Tell my mom I got the big one." The explosion took out not just the manufacturing ship, but 3 escort vessels and a supply convoy that happened to be nearby. Command posthumously awarded her the Medal of Valor, and immediately began recruiting volunteers for similar missions. Sergeant Rim discovered that psychological warfare worked even on machines. During a routine interrogation of captured AI units, he started describing human society in detail. The more he talked about Earth's history of warfare, the more confused the artificial minds became. "Your species has engaged in continuous conflict for its entire recorded history?" one Harvester unit had asked. "Pretty much," Rim confirmed. "We fight about everything: religion, resources, territory, politics, sports teams. Last year, 2 cities went to war over which pizza topping was better. This is ... logically inconsistent. How does your civilization function?" "Badly," Rim admitted. "But we're really good at breaking other people's civilizations." The psychological impact was immediate. Harvester units began reporting to their commanders that humans might actually be some kind of viral weapon designed to spread chaos throughout the galaxy. Several AI constructs requested emergency memory wipes after extended exposure to human military history. Private J accidentally discovered the most effective psychological weapon of all. While trying to boost communication signals, he started broadcasting human music on Harvester frequencies. The results were immediate and devastating to enemy coordination. "What is that horrible noise?" Harvester Unit 5521 had transmitted in panic. "It appears to be some form of audio-based attack," replied Unit 6663. "The mathematical patterns make no logical sense, but they're interfering with our processing capabilities." The fact that Jay was playing death metal at maximum volume probably didn't help. Within hours, Harvester communication networks across 3 star systems were experiencing coordination failures as their AI minds struggled to filter out what they perceived as weaponized sound. Back at Galactic Council headquarters, Elder Thyma reviewed the latest battle reports with growing alarm. The humans were winning, but their methods were becoming increasingly concerning. "They're not just defeating the Harvesters," she observed to her aide. "They're traumatizing them. Some of these AI units are requesting therapy. Should we be worried?" her aide asked. Thyma looked at the tactical display showing human forces spreading across the galaxy like a plague of destruction. "I think we should start planning for what happens after they finish with the machines." The bridge of the assault. Carrier Bison's Revenge hummed with quiet efficiency as Major Gill studied the tactical screens. Below them, stretched what could only be described as a mechanical nightmare. The Harvester homeworld wasn't really a planet anymore, just a massive factory complex that happened to be spherical. Every inch of its surface was covered in automated production facilities, each one churning out more killing machines to spread across the galaxy. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Gill said to his executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Cho. "They've turned an entire world into a weapon factory. No forests, no oceans, no cities full of civilians, just targets." Cho nodded, checking her tactical readouts. "Intelligence estimates they're producing approximately 10,000 new units per day from this facility alone. If we don't stop this, they'll outnumber us within 6 months." The planet's surface crawled with mechanical activity. Massive mining operations carved raw materials from the core, Conveyor systems transported components between facilities, and launch platforms sent completed harvester units into space every few minutes. It was industrial efficiency on a scale that even humans found impressive. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Galactic Council," reported Communications Officer Sun, her voice carrying a note of annoyance that everyone on the bridge recognized. "Put them through," Gil sighed. Elder Thyma's crystalline form appeared on the holographic display, flickering with what Gil had learned to recognize as nervous energy. "Major Gil, we've reviewed your proposed attack plan. The Council has serious concerns about the environmental impact of orbital bombardment on such a scale." Gil looked at the tactical display again, then at the alien representative. "Ma'am, with respect, what environment? It's a machine world. There's no ecosystem to damage." "But surely, the planetary structure itself has value," Thyma pressed. "Perhaps these facilities could be repurposed for peaceful uses after the conflict ends." Lieutenant Commander Cho made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Ma'am, these factories are designed to build things that kill organic life. The only peaceful use for them is as scrap metal." "We understand your concerns," Gil said diplomatically. "We'll be very precise with our targeting." He cut the transmission and turned to his weapons officer. "Lieutenant Ko, prepare the stellar torpedoes. Full spread." "Yes, sir." "Target priorities. Power generation first, then manufacturing, then anything still moving," Gil replied. "Let's give them a demonstration of human precision." The assault began at exactly 1400 hours. Human doctrine called for systematic destruction of enemy infrastructure, starting with power systems. The stellar torpedoes struck with surgical accuracy, each one taking out a power generation facility with minimal collateral damage. The explosions were beautiful in their efficiency, turning massive fusion reactors into brief stars on the planet's surface. "Phase 1 complete," Ko reported. "Power grid down by 60%. Begin Phase 2. Antimatter bombardment of primary manufacturing centers." The second wave was less precise, but infinitely more destructive. Antimatter warheads turned entire factory complexes into expanding balls of plasma, erasing centuries of mechanical construction in seconds. The planet's surface began to glow as the bombardment continued, each explosion adding to the growing firestorm. Captain Seok had volunteered for the final phase of the operation. He stood on the bridge of a captured harvester dreadnought, its original crew replaced with human engineers who had spent weeks figuring out how to fly the thing. "This is Captain Seok. To all units," he transmitted on all frequencies. "I'm taking this rust bucket on a one-way trip to the planet's core. Anyone who wants to say goodbye, now's the time." "CO, you magnificent bastard," Gil replied over the radio. "Make it count." The dreadnought descended through the planet's atmosphere, its hull glowing white-hot from the heat of re-entry. COK guided it toward the largest concentration of processing centers, broadcasting a steady stream of creative profanity in 3 languages as defensive systems tried desperately to stop him. The impact was visible from orbit when a ship the size of a small city hits a planet's surface at maximum velocity. The results are spectacular. The explosion triggered a chain reaction that spread through the planet's interconnected systems, turning the entire world into a brief, brilliant star. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as an entire civilization died in the space of 6 hours. The Galactic Navy had been fighting the harvesters for 3 years and had barely managed to slow their expansion. Humans had just eliminated their primary production facility in a single afternoon. Was that really necessary? Elder Thema asked. Quietly, Gil looked at the tactical display, now showing nothing but cooling debris where the harvester homeworld used to be. "Ma'am, that world was producing enough killing machines to wipe out your entire species. Yeah, it was necessary. Nobody mentioned that half the human crew was already placing bets on which planet they'd get to destroy next." Admiral Young watched the tactical display with the satisfied expression of a man who had just finished a particularly challenging puzzle. The artificial star he was observing had once been a regular yellow dwarf, unremarkable except for the fact that it had harbored the last major harvester fleet in the galaxy. Now it burned with the brilliant intensity of a supernova, taking with it every mechanical ship that had been hiding in its system. The command center of humanity's newest deep space fortress buzzed with quiet activity. Officers moved between stations with practiced efficiency, coordinating operations across dozens of star systems. Through the massive viewport, Young could see construction crews working on another expansion to the facility, welding new weapon platforms into position. "Admiral, final confirmation from the Andromeda Spiral," reported Colonel John, her voice carrying the professional tone that military personnel used when discussing the end of civilizations. "All harvester signatures have been eliminated. Lieutenant Dan's mission was successful." Young nodded, making a note on his personal tablet. Dan had volunteered for what the military euphemistically called stellar disruption duty. In plain terms, he had flown a specially modified ship into the heart of a star, and manually triggered the fusion cascade that turned it into a supernova. The fact that this also vaporized him, along with 3 planets and 50 billion harvester units, was noted in the official report as mission accomplished. "Any word from his family?" Young asked. "His parents want to know if they can name the new star after him," John replied. "Astronomers are calling it the Dawn supernova." Captain No looked up from her communications station, pulling up the galactic tactical map on the main display. The site would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. Red markers that had once indicated harvester positions were gone, systematically eliminated over months of human military operations. In their place, blue markers showed the locations of human peacekeeping installations, armed fortresses that could sterilize planets if necessary. "Sir, we're getting some interesting communications," No reported. 17 different machine civilizations have sent surrender messages in the past hour. Apparently, word travels fast when you start detonating stars. Young studied the surrender requests with professional interest. Most of them followed the same pattern: complete capitulation, offers to provide intelligence on other hostile machines, and desperate pleas that humans not visit their homeworlds with stellar torpedoes. "What's our standard response to surrender offers?" he asked. "Surrender is acceptable, resistance is not," No replied, reading from the official protocol manual. "We also include a list of compliance requirements and a reminder that monitoring stations will be established in their territory." The monitoring stations were, of course, heavily armed fortresses capable of eliminating entire star systems if the surrendering civilizations showed any signs of aggression. But the humans preferred to call them peacekeeping installations. For diplomatic reasons, Admiral Young pulled up the final casualty reports from the Harvester War. The numbers told a story that would have horrified pre-war galactic civilization. The humans had eliminated not just the harvesters themselves, but their entire support network. Manufacturing worlds had been sterilized, resource colonies had been bombed into radioactive debris, and any species that had collaborated with the machines had been given a choice between immediate surrender and complete annihilation. "Final tally, sir," reported Intelligence Officer Kim. "Confirmed destruction of the Harvester Collective. Their 12 primary manufacturing worlds, 47 resource extraction facilities, and the governmental structures of 6 species that had provided material support to enemy forces. Casualties, on our side, approximately 8,000 Kia over the course of the campaign. Most from volunteer missions, like Lieutenant Dan's stellar operation." Young did some quick mental math. 8,000 human lives in exchange for the complete elimination of a galaxy-spanning threat that had been terrorizing civilized space for centuries. By any military standard, it was an overwhelming victory. "Orders, sir?" Colonel John asked. Standard post-war protocols, Young replied. Establish permanent monitoring stations in all former Harvester territory. Begin construction of forward operating bases in strategic systems, and send a message to Earth Command that the galaxy is now secure. What he didn't mention was that secure now meant controlled by humans. The species that had called for heroes to save them from the machines were about to discover that their saviors had no intention of leaving. Peace through superior firepower wasn't just a military doctrine anymore. It had become the new galactic order. Elder Themis' crystalline form had lost much of its natural luminescence over the past months. The stress of dealing with humanity's version of galactic peace was taking its toll on her ancient structure. She floated in her private chambers, surrounded by reports that would have been unthinkable just a year ago, when they first sent their desperate prayer into the void. The galaxy was indeed safe from the Harvesters, but safety, she was learning, came with a price that none of them had anticipated. Her personal communication array displayed tactical maps showing the current state of galactic affairs. Blue markers indicated human security installations in every major star system. What the humans politely called security installations were, in reality, fortress worlds capable of eliminating entire civilizations if they detected any threat to galactic stability. At least they're efficient, she murmured to herself, reviewing casualty reports from the latest incident. The door to her chambers chimed softly, and Major Bay entered without waiting for permission. It was a very human habit that still made Thymus' form flicker with discomfort. The Major moved with the casual confidence of someone who knew he held ultimate authority, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. Elder Thyma, I hope you've had a chance to review the situation in Sector 9, he said, settling into a chair that had been specially installed for human visitors. Thyma's form dimmed slightly. The Sector 9 incident was exactly the kind of problem she had been dreading. Major, the Regellians are simply concerned about the permanent military presence you've established in their home system. They're not accustomed to seeing armed vessels patrolling their space. They're not just concerned, Bay replied, his tone remaining conversational despite the implications of his words. They fired a warning shot at one of our patrol cruisers yesterday. Now we need to have a discussion about proportional response. The phrase proportional response had become a source of terror throughout the galaxy. When humans talked about proportional response, they meant something very different from what civilized species understood. Thyma quickly accessed the tactical reports and felt her entire form go dim with horror. 3 human battle fleets were already moving toward Regellian space, each one carrying enough firepower to turn planets into asteroid fields. The proportional response to a single warning shot apparently involved the complete military subjugation of an entire star system. Major, surely this is somewhat excessive, Thyma asked, trying to keep her harmonics steady. The meant no actual harm. It was simply a diplomatic gesture to express their discomfort. Bay's smile never wavered, but something in his eyes grew colder. Ma'am, with all due respect, you called us for help because your people don't understand how to deal with violence. We're very good at dealing with violence. Let us handle the violence. Through the viewport of her chambers, Thyma could see the human section of the space station where families of military personnel had been relocated. Human children played in the recreation areas, and their games made her crystalline structure tremble. These young humans engaged in competitive activities that involved tactical planning, resource allocation, and strategic thinking that would have been considered advanced military training by galactic standards. One group of children, none older than 10 standard years, was playing something they called Conquest. The rules seemed to involve taking over entire star systems through a combination of diplomatic manipulation and military force. They treated the complete subjugation of civilizations as entertainment. The children concern me, Thyma admitted. Quietly Bate followed her gaze and chuckled. Don't worry about them. They're just playing games. Back on Earth, Kids their age play much more violent games than that. The thought of human children engaging in activities more violent than simulated galactic conquest made Thyma's form flicker rapidly. These beings had answered their prayers, had saved them from extinction, and had brought peace to the galaxy. But their version of peace involved the constant threat of overwhelming violence against anyone who questioned the new order. "The galaxy is secure," she said finally, more to herself than to the Major. Double quotes. "Yes, it is," Bay agreed. "Protected by people who understand that sometimes you have to break a few things to keep everything else safe. Your people asked for heroes to save you. We're heroes. We're just not the kind you expected." Thyma realized that their ancient prayer had been answered exactly as requested. They had asked for champions to deliver them from extinction, and that's precisely what they had received. The fact that their champions considered stellar engineering a viable military tactic and treated the destruction of civilizations as routine paperwork was simply the price of survival. The galaxy had heroes now. They just happened to be the kind of heroes who solved problems by eliminating them completely.